Welcome back, y'all, to episode 2 of my poker vlog. I'm having a lot of fun doing this, and today I'm going to be going over a session of 2-5 I played this last Friday in my local poker room in Sarasota. I first got into the poker room. I was intending to play 1-3 on this given day. Our 1-3 game has a $500 cap. They have good games, and I like playing that stake limit at the current moment. But I walked in and I took a look around. There were 3 games running, and I really wasn't very impressed with the lineups. It was a lot of the same people I see on a regular basis, and didn't really seem like there was much action going on. So I was not super enthusiastic about the prospects of playing in those games. I was going to do it anyway, but as I was looking around, I heard the 2-5 game being announced, and I took a look at that, and I was very intrigued at the players playing in that game. So I decided to go to the floor, put my name on the list, and grab a seat. So I buy in for $500 and quickly get dealt 10-9 of hearts on the big blind. I get a pretty well-known player in our local scene who's on the bad aggressive side. He's a younger guy, not very savvy with poker, but he definitely has a reputation for splashing around. So he opens up $20 in the cutoff, and I have 10-9 of hearts on the big blind, and I throw in $15 to defend the big blind. The flop comes down 5 of spades, 5 of clubs, 8 of spades. I check, and he checks behind. The turn was a 9 of clubs, giving me top pair. And at this point, I do have the option of betting, but just given who the player is and how wide his range possibly can be, I think he could be opening an incredibly wide range. Maybe any offsuit connectors. He could be opening offsuit aces, maybe even offsuit kings, a lot of offsuit broadways, just a really wide range. And I also don't have the strongest 9 in the world, so there is a chance I am dominated here sometimes. So I think there's pretty good reason to go ahead and check the turn to this guy, especially because he is the kind of guy who will open up and bluff occasionally, maybe more than occasionally. So I go ahead and check it over to him, and he actually quickly checks back the turn as well. This kind of leads me to believe he is on a ace high or king high type of hand. The river comes off a 5 offsuit, so now the board is 5-5-8-9-5. At this point, I think it's really likely he's going to call any size bet, maybe around pot. There's about 35 in the middle, and looking back, I really would have liked to see myself just bet the full 30, maybe even 35, but in the moment I was going to do 30, but I ended up settling on 25 just because I didn't want to give him any chance of folding an ace high type hand. But looking back at it, I just think there's no chance this guy folds ace high, so I would have liked to see myself size up just a little bit. I go ahead and make the $25 bet, and he immediately calls me and flips over ace 6 offsuit. Hand 2, we get dealt queen 9 of diamonds in the small blind, and we get a hijack limper who's playing around $400 effective, so 80 big blinds. It folds to us in the small blind with queen 9 of diamonds, and I raise it up to 25. The big blind calls me, and the big blind is a younger guy. I do recognize his face, but I don't remember really much about him. I haven't really played much cards with him, but I get the impression that maybe he is some type of a semi-thinking player, given that he's a little bit younger, kind of clean cut. I don't think he's a professional by any means, but maybe he's trying and thinking things through a little bit, right? So he defends the big blind, and I'm gonna put him on a range of some stuff like suited aces, suited kings, maybe some suited connectors, suited gappers, maybe some offsuit aces, depending on how wide this guy's defending. I think he can have some offsuit broadways like ace 10, ace jack, king queen off, things like this. So he puts in the call, and the hijack actually folds, which I wasn't expecting. The flop comes down ace of diamonds, king of diamonds, 7 of hearts. On this board, I I think my range is obviously crushing this guy's range because he would have 3-bet me with aces, kings, ace, king. So I have all the premium holdings in this situation. And also my isolating range from the small blind with a limper is going to be a little bit tighter than usual. So in general, I think this board is really, really strong for us, and I think we can do a lot of betting here. I would go as far as to say it's possible we could be doing a bit of range betting, but I would retract that statement just because I think because he's defending the big blind versus a small blind range, it's possible he's not super wide, so we might be allowed to do some checking here, and it is a semi-wet texture. However, with the ace king on board specifically, it's a really strong board for us. I go ahead and fire out a c-bet of $20, and he makes the call. The turn is a 10 of diamonds, giving us the nut flush. There's about $88 in the middle, and I consider my options, and I think because my range is so strong here that I'm still going to have a lot of hands that aren't flushes that are going to want to bet. Maybe things like sets, some straights, maybe not so much just pure top pair, but I think I still have a lot of hands that want to bet to continue to get value from top pair, maybe second pair, pair plus diamond draw. So I think with my range, I'm going to be just going ahead and betting 1/3 with the hands I bet. I'll also do quite a bit of checking here because I do have a lot of hands that probably can't stand to barrel the turn. You know, maybe some lower flushes could fit into this category. It's possible I could check some nut flushes, but probably not too many. They probably want to go ahead and start and keep putting money in the middle. So I go ahead and bet 30, and I think something cool about the sizing is it allows us to get value from a really wide range of hands, and it also it might look weak in a live player's eyes, seeing you bet 1/3 because they might just think that it's a weak bet. So they might overvalue some hands in their own range and put in some raises, as well as they may turn some hands into bluffs, which is a pretty sweet benefit, right? So we put in the $30 bet, and he makes the call, and the turn was a 4 of spades. There's about around 150 in the middle. I think it was like 148 precisely, and now we have a decision. So in the moment, I landed on making a 1/3 sizing, a $50 bet, because I thought there was a lot of weak top pair in his range that make the call. And also on the turn, it did seem like he hesitated a little bit, so it kind of indicated to me that possibly he was on a weaker part of his range in this situation. So I thought the small sizing made a lot of sense because it's like, if we bet small, we can get a value from a wider portion of his range. It's also possible if he has a hand like a 2-pair, a straight, a flush, when we bet 1/3, he might interpret that as weak, so he might go ahead and think he needs to raise us for value, and in which case that's obviously really great because we get to come over the top. If I'm being honest, I'm not super confident in how this spot should be balanced in our shoes. I do think we should probably have some overbets at equilibrium, but I don't. Yeah, I do think we should have some bets at equilibrium just because we're gonna obviously have some nutted combos in our range. We're gonna have some bluffs as well when we have like a queen of diamond blocker in hand that will probably benefit from using large bets. But I also think part of our strategy is gonna be going small because there are hands in our range that aren't strong enough to bet big but are strong enough to bet small. Also, a small bet does put a lot of pressure on certain parts of the guy's range, say like 10x with a diamond, king x with the diamond that called the turn, trying to improve. So a small bet in a lot of ways is pretty effective as a bluff. I don't know how much I would be doing that in game. I would probably be doing it a bit more exploitatively in a live game because if I bet small, I would anticipate a lot of live players to interpret that as weak and call me a bit more. The next hand is a pretty basic one. We get a cutoff limp playing around 400. We get Jack 8 offsuit in the small blind, and we complete for $3, and the big blind checks. And again, it's that same young guy who seems to be kind of thinking. Anyways, he checks the big blind, and we get a flop of Jack 6-2 rainbow. The pot's $12 after rake, and I have an option of checking or betting. In the past, I might have checked here a little bit more because I would hope that, you know, the people in position, they might bet like a hand, like a 6 or a deuce for protection. Maybe they bet some bluffs, just thinking our check looks weak. But because the live dynamics, I consider them to be pretty passive, that I've kind of switched camps, and I think just betting out ourselves is a pretty good strategy, because our hand does need a little bit of equity denial, and it's also pretty nice to go ahead and start getting value ourselves, and just not let things check through and let people just realize free equity. So I laid out $10, and the big blind puts in a $25 raise. The cutoff folds and actions back to us. I'm really not excited here, because the big blind can have, you know, any 2-pair combos. He can have 2s, possibly 6s. He really has a lot of strong value hands here. Potentially even Jack 10 or Jack 9 could all potentially fall into a value range. I consider folding seriously, and I think folding might even be the best play, but there is a chance that the guy is raising some gut shots, maybe some weaker jacks, like a Jack 5, because he is on the big blind again, and he only made it 2.5x, so it's possible. We only need about 25% equity to continue, so I go ahead and make the call. The turn's a 7, and we check, and the big blind goes ahead and fires a $35 bet into 60. It's tempting given his price, but the sizing also screams at me value, value, value. I think he can have like a cajillion 2 pairs, stronger top pair. So I go ahead and make a sad face fold. The next hand was pretty interesting. I get dealt ace jack of clubs under the gun in an 8 max game. I open up to $22. The local room I play in isn't a red chip room, so we actually have the option to use odd numbers like that, so that's pretty sweet. I like using an in-between sizing like this from the earlier positions, just to try to get a heads up a bit more, and 25 just seems a bit too big. So I make it 22. The small blind makes a call, who is a tight aggressive player. I have intel that he is I think he's like a professional or semi-professional who plays up in Tampa pretty regularly. My understanding is he's on the tight side, maybe a bit passive. Anyways, he calls a small blind, and I'm anticipating him to have a range of a lot of small to medium pocket pairs, some suited broadways, maybe some suited connectors, and not really too much else. The big blind, who I consider to be a pretty sticky and weak player, makes the defend on the big blind. The flop comes down ace of hearts, 3 of hearts, and a ace of spades. The pot's 59, and it checks to us, and we fire at a 1/3 sizing for 20. We could technically size up here because we did make a strong hand, and the big blind is very unlikely to fold really much of anything that has equity. I think he'll call any gut shot, any flush draw, any ace, obviously, any pair. So I think there's a lot of merit in actually just betting the flop a touch bigger, but I settle on 1/3, which I think is fine. I think it puts an insane amount of pressure on the small blind, because a lot of his range is going to be small pairs. It's also not terrible, because it might make him a bit more sticky and put him in a tougher spot that he's not familiar with, and maybe make a few more bad calls. Anyways, he actually gets out of the way, and the big blind calls. The turn is a 4 of diamonds, bringing a backdoor flush draw. The ace of diamonds was on the flop, so there's 2 flush draws on board, and there's $99 in the pot. I fire out of a turn bet of 75, and the big blind tanks for a little bit. He starts piling up chips, almost like he was going to raise me, which was a little bit concerning, because I obviously don't really feel great about getting raised on this turn, and yeah, it really would put me in a tough spot against this specific player, but it might even be a fold, just given his range in this situation. So anyways, he ends up deciding on a call, and the river is a 4 of hearts, and there's about 250 in the middle. So given his tank, I don't think he ever tanks like this with an ace, obviously. Plus, we're not really targeting aces for value in the first place. The only hand we lose to in this situation is 4-4 specifically, which would be quads. So here, since we're not trying to get value from an ace, we're really trying to get value from maybe a really sticky underpair, or what I thought would be even more likely is some type of flush draw that got really stubborn on the turn and made a call, maybe like a king high flush draw, and then the river makes a double paired board, which obviously should, you know, be incredibly concerning given that we bet flop, three-way, bet turn on a double ace board. We're gonna have a lot of ace X in this situation, so alarm bells should be running or ringing in a normal person's brain, but I don't know about this, guys. So there's 250 in the middle. He checks to us, and at this point, I just really want to make him call me. I don't want to bet too big and make him make a correct fold. So I just fire out a bet of 100, about 40% pot. I thought this would be a good sizing to get called by a flush. It's not too big that he realizes that he should fold, but it's also sizable enough where it's like we get a nice healthy value bet out of you know, stubborn flush draws that call the turn, and he makes the call and disappointingly mucks his hand. So the last hand of the session was a really interesting one, and I'm a bit upset with how I played it actually in hindsight, but it also made me pretty aware of how valuable this blog is, because I normally might not have spent so much time reflecting on this, but knowing that it was going to be viewed by loads of people, it made me think about it a little bit more, and I was a bit disappointed about this hand, and I think I could have played it a lot better, and I think I left some money on the table in this one. So we get a button straddle to $10. Again, it's that same young kid that we've gotten involved with a couple times. We're playing about 840 effective, 840, so with the straddle on, we're basically 84 big blinds effective, and so that's relevant information, right? We get an early position limper playing around $300. It's an older guy, new to the table, and it folds to us in the cutoff with pocket tens, and we bump it up to 45. Typically with a straddle on, I'll make it between 3.5 to 4x, and with the caller, I'm going to add an additional big blind. The button starts talking to me, saying, "Oh, I got a good hand," which, you know, I don't really take seriously at all. He kind of like is talking to me, and eventually, you know, makes the call. I guess in his mind, this is his attempt at throwing me off of my system, in his own words. So he makes the call, and the other player actually folds. So we go to the flop with about $100 in the middle, and the flop is 10 of hearts, 7 of diamonds, and 6 of spades. So we flop top set. There are straight possibilities, but, you know, top set, we're at an SPR of about 8. So we're in a good situation. This is nice. We're liking life right now. Because I don't necessarily view this guy as, you know, I think he's like maybe a semi-thinking player, but I don't think he's like a rock star by any means. I don't necessarily want to just start checking here, even though it's not a great board for our range. So I go ahead and just fire out a 50% c-bet, making a $50 bet into 100. He quickly raises us to 125, and I make a call. See, this is where I think mistake number one happened. In the moment, I was considering, well, because he defended the straddle, he might have a lot of combos of things like 8-9 offsuit, but the reality is he's also going to have things like 6s, 7s, and if he is defending things like 9-8 offsuit, he also is going to have things like 10-7 suited, 7-6 suited, possibly 7-6 offsuit if he's defending the offsuit combos of 9-8. If he's only defending the suited combos of 9-8, then we're just really crushing his range, because there's only 4 combos in that instance, while he can have like 3 combos of 7-6. He can have 6 combos of lower sets, or 1 combo of 10-7 suited. So all in all, I think that just because we're so high up in our range in this situation, and even if we have to get it in against 9-8, we still have really good equity, and by calling, we still are going to have to get it in against 9-8 as well. The only downside is if we call, we allow the opportunity for things like 2-pair to potentially get counterfeited, like a 4 straight coming off. If he has a set, a 4 straight coming off. So I think there's, just because we're so high up in our range, I think there's a lot of merit in just going ahead and re-raising the flop. But I make the mistake, in my opinion, and I just flat call. I don't think it's terrible. It does keep bluffs in his range potentially if he is capable of that, but that's another reason why I think raising the flop is a bit better, is because generally people in live games tend to not be overly aggressive and stuff, so it's possible that we should just be clicking it back on him. A quick caveat is, he did make it 2.5x, so in my mind I thought that potentially could be a signal of weakness, and I thought if I did re-pop him on the flop, it was possible he makes a tight fold, or a correct fold, for that matter. So that is relevant, and maybe adds a little bit of merit to my flat call. So we go ahead and make the call, and the turn is a 6 of diamonds, pairing the board, giving us the nut boat, which is pretty nice. I check, and he checks behind. The river is an 8, bringing a 4 straight to the board. So at this point, it's kind of interesting. I don't think he's flop raising me with a ton of 9x, but I do think it's possible he has some. I thought it was possible, like maybe he could check back some boats, getting tricky, but I can't count on that too much. I think in general, his flop raising range, check back turn, it kind of looks like possibly a lot of top pair type stuff. Maybe some 9x that flop raise and then check back turn. So if we check and go for a check raise against 9x, I think it's very possible he could fold versus a check raise unless we make it really small. So I don't necessarily like that option when we can just bet a large sizing ourselves and get called by all of his 9x. Plus, if we check and he has a hand like top pair or say jacks, he's very likely just to check it back and be very happy to get to showdown, and I don't really want that to happen either. If I check, I also think those are going to miss I'm going to miss a check raise against as well. If he has a boat, there's a good chance he just goes ahead and raises himself anyway, trying to get value from R9. So in this situation, I just don't see a check raise being super viable, because A, we want to get max value from his 9x. We want to give him the chance of making a bad call with top pair or better. And if he has a boat, I think there's a good chance he's going to raise us anyway, targeting our 9x region, or possibly a lower boat or trips. So I fire out a bet of 275. He deliberates a little bit and eventually makes a call and says he had 10-9. Think about it now, actually, talking about this hand again. I don't hate my call as much as I initially did because of flop sizing. I think after the fact, I was a little bit disappointed, because the fact that he told me he had 10-9, it made me believe it's like, wow, that's a hand that probably would have called a flop re-raise because he had top pair plus a gutter, and then he would have probably called a small turn bet and then got there on the river, allowing us to bet like a 30% all-in river sizing and very likely getting all his money. So, maybe that was a little bit results-oriented thinking. Looking back on it, if you have a perspective, I'll be interested in hearing your feedback on it. Fair enough. But that wraps up the last hand. The sun is almost completely down at this point, and I think it's time for me to go. Anyways, guys, I really appreciate your attention. If you like this content, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, stay in the loop. I'll be releasing videos pretty consistently on this channel, and get involved in the comment section below. I really enjoy talking to people, and it makes this all the more fun. Anyways, guys, thanks for your time and attention, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.